Project Lead is just like a warm embrace. Project Lead helped me become a better board member, but it also helped me really invest in that nonprofit that I cared about in a new way.
This is Hourglass, the podcast for United Way of King County in Seattle. Coming up, we'll chat about Project Lead, United Way's annual training program that helps people of color develop leadership and management skills to serve on local nonprofit boards of directors. We will also hear from United Way's Chief Philanthropy Officer, Lindsay Harper, about our year-end giving campaign, and we'll discuss an upcoming volunteer opportunity. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for tuning in. When it comes to the racial makeup of nonprofit boards of directors, looks can be deceiving. Many nonprofits that serve communities of color, for example, feature people of color quite prominently in their websites, their social media, and their advertising. That might lead one to believe that the governing bodies of those organizations are loaded with people of color too. But often that is not the case. According to BoardSource, an organization that tracks the racial makeup of nonprofit boards, about 78% of nonprofit board members are white, and about 87% of board chairs are white. While Latinos comprise nearly 19% of the U.S. population, they make up just 5% of all board members on U.S. nonprofits. In fact, none of the nation's racial minorities have board representation that matches their U.S. population percentages. The importance of racial diversity and representation in leadership has been well documented, and even the American Psychological Association agrees. In its video series, Representation Matters, Diversity and Its Impact on Leadership, the association says that representation of diverse communities can increase social connection, belonging, and community support. And an article about board diversity on the Conversation Academic Media website says that the lack of diversity in the nonprofit sector is a major concern for organizations that provide services or advocacy to communities of color. Lack of diversity can undermine trust among communities that nonprofits serve, the conversation says. It can also hamper communication and disrupt efforts to address racial inequality. Conversely, when representation is in the room where decisions are made, the result bolsters decision-making by bringing unique perspectives that shape how nonprofits approach their work and their mission. United Way of King County recognized that this was a concern decades ago. That's why we launched Project Leadership, Effectiveness, and Diversity, or Project LEAD. It is an annual 4-week training program to prepare people of color to develop their leadership and management potential. Project LEAD readies people for nonprofit boards and gives them the skills and expertise to excel in these important decision-making spaces. More than 1,200 people have participated in Project LEAD since its inception, and many have gone on to serve on the boards of local nonprofits. They've made sure that local nonprofit boards have community representation and that people of color have seats at the table where programs, projects, and initiatives designed to serve them are created. Applications have opened for Project LEAD's 2025 program, which will be held in March on Wednesdays and Saturdays at Heinz at 4th and Madison in downtown Seattle. The program will conclude with a graduation on a date yet to be determined. Project LEAD sessions will include topics such as issues facing nonprofit organizations, board operations and protocol, collaboration and conflict resolution, the board's role in equity leadership, and the legal implications of board service. United Way of King County is proud to offer Project LEAD as a way of creating a pool of leaders with the skills necessary to make an impact on local nonprofit boards. It also helps people of color already serving on boards to improve their ability to better support and advocate for their communities. United Way recently sat down with 2 Project LEAD graduates about their experiences with the program. The first is United Way Community Impact Manager Whitney Nakamura, who said she signed up for the program shortly after being chosen to serve on the board of the Roots Young Adult Shelter in Seattle.
I was a longtime program volunteer with a local nonprofit, and I had just recently joined the board of directors and I was feeling overwhelmed. I was feeling like I didn't really have the orientation or the onboarding. And actually somebody had heard of Project Lead and said, gosh, Whit, like this sounds like exactly what you need. This is kind of the training and foundation building that would really be the right fit for you. And so I looked on the website and I was like, gosh, this seems perfect for me. This has kind of the right orientation to board membership, but not just board membership, board leadership. So like, I don't want to just learn the kind of core components of board roles and responsibilities. That is certainly important, but also I want to understand how I can grow my voice, grow my impact and really develop as a leader in that role. And so Project Lead really had kind of all the right elements to help me build that foundation, build that confidence. And then I think most importantly, build the network. Like I initially was attracted to it in understanding kind of the role and responsibility of a board member. What I didn't realize is kind of the networking and the relationship building is just as important. I came for the content, but I really left like so inspired and motivated by my cohort, by the guests who came in and spoke. And so I really learned from and with everyone in my cohort. And that was just as powerful as kind of understanding core board governance, fundraising, all of those kind of important concepts.
Can you sort of take me through the Project Lead course? I mean, just what happens maybe first week? What happens, as you...
Yeah, sure. So Project Lead is just like a warm embrace. Mm-hmm. Like you are entering a space where, there's a beautiful meeting space. There's great food. There's opportunity to just really like casually connect and build relationships with your cohort. And so that is kind of the foundation. That warm, welcoming introduction is really critical to like learning from and with your cohort. And each session kind of builds the momentum. So you're starting with kind of a foundation of the nonprofit world, of how these different boards work. And then, each session you're learning different components that are relevant to board membership, board leadership, good governance, fundraising. So you're learning all these key components, but you're also practicing, and you're practicing with each other. And that was so helpful because, to be honest, I was a little intimidated when I first joined, because Project Lead just attracts such remarkable people. I mean, there was a really good diversity in terms of identities and experience and backgrounds and certainly like professional roles and experience too. And so it really is just this very like impressive group of people, really committed BIPOC professionals that are really invested in this region, really care about promoting equity, and some really impressive people. And so I was a little intimidated at first, like, oh gosh, like, what am I going to contribute? Like, everyone is so inspiring. And the way that the program is designed, where you are learning from these experts coming in, providing, really important information on whatever their topic is, but you're also working with your cohort. So you're in small groups working with each other, and that chance to work in partnership, and everyone is bringing different perspectives and skills and ideas. And that was so helpful to see, like, oh yeah, we all contribute here. Like, we are all bringing something different to this small group. And it was also just another way to build strong relationships within the whole cohort.
Prior to joining, if you were to answer this question, prior to joining Project Lead, I didn't know blank about board of directors.
I would say so. So like I mentioned, I was kind of in an interesting situation in that most of my peers in the cohort were curious about board membership, interested in pursuing that. But I had actually recently joined a board of directors before I started Project Lead. I would say Project Lead helped me understand why I was struggling as a board member. I was on the board of a nonprofit that I had been connected to for years. I cared deeply about the nonprofit. I enjoyed supporting that work. And I was really struggling as a new board member. And Project Lead helped me understand why I was struggling to kind of have confidence in my leadership and really contribute in the way I wanted to. And so that was both in helping me develop the knowledge and skill set, but also helping me understand how identity was such a big part of that.
Let's kind of segue into that for my next question. So Project Lead is about making sure that those organizations that do want to bring in boards of color can do that they can have a pool of applicants. What would you say to someone who is one of those people? What do you need to know and understand? This is what it feels like as a person of color to be on you.
So when I joined my nonprofit board, like I said, I'd been involved in the nonprofit for a while, but I realized on the board I was still feeling isolated. I was still feeling like there aren't others that I have a lot of shared experiences or identities or connection with. And I didn't realize how dramatically that was impacting my engagement and my contribution. Like it really, the fact that there weren't others that looked like me, that kind of shared those core identities or experiences, it limited my engagement and contribution. And I think being able to be in a space where in Project Lead that was understood, like everything was approached with that context of how identity and particularly having marginalized identities can really impact your voice, your engagement, how you're perceived in these spaces was really critical. And so Project Lead helped me become a better board member, but it also helped me really invest in that nonprofit that I cared about in a new way. And that was because after I graduated from Project Lead and saw that there was so much value in that experience, I connected two things I loved. So I connected the Project Lead program with the nonprofit where I was volunteering. And so even though I termed off my board now, I'm so proud. Like, one of the things I'm most excited about is that I was able to get my nonprofit connected so that every year at the end of the cohort, there's this great networking time where cohort members and alum can meet with nonprofits that are seeking board members. And so that was just so special to me that even though I am no longer on this board of directors, I know that they're in good hands because I know that there is this strong pathway of new board leadership and it's worked. So other Project Lead graduates have gone on to serve on this board of directors. And I also see that in community. I mean, like I said earlier, I was so inspired by my cohort. I just met so many incredible people. And it's been so satisfying to see them in community, right? To see these nonprofits that I care about. And then to find out oh, so-and-so from my cohort is on their board. It makes the world smaller. And it just makes me so excited because I know these are incredible people who are promoting equity, who really care about this region, and that board is in good hands.
Project Lead graduate Mutemwa Mesheke, a product manager at Microsoft, participated in the program after being named to the board of trustees of his alma mater, Princeton University. He had heard much about the importance of service while a student at Princeton, and once he became a board member, he was eager to learn more.
When I moved to Seattle, my friend was looking on LinkedIn at a couple of opportunities, and they saw the Project Lead ad come up, and basically the description around like training, underrepresented minorities on how to, learn more about board service, how to pursue these opportunities. And so they sent it my way because they were like, hey, you're early in career, relatively young for someone who's serving on a board. And I think that, first of all, this aligns with your, sort of racial, social justice kind of lens and the things that you prioritize during college. And also it would be a great training experience for you who's looking to make impact on your first, board opportunity at Princeton. So that's kind of how I found out about it. And it's been such an amazing investment. I cannot say enough how much I loved my experience at Project Lead. I got to meet a lot of great presenters, people who are very experienced, executive directors / board members, and just involved members in the nonprofit community in the Seattle area. So I got to see like kind of the lens outside the tech bubble of like what are the issues on the ground facing, Seattle. Like, for example, early learning education, people doing work in, supporting people who are experiencing homelessness. Just like kind of just taking a perspective outside, the world that I live in, which is, largely a group of people who, work in tech companies, that sort of thing, and kind of see Washington more holistically. So that was, it was amazing. And we got to learn more about how nonprofits work on the ground. Thinking of board perspective as more than just, kind of principles and opinions and like directional, sort of thinking, and more so like the day-to-day management of a nonprofit from the lens of a board member. Is at some point you have to review like tax documents. You're a fiduciary member of the organization. And so you have some responsibilities as a board member that are, more so like perennial activities in the audit land. And I also just met just really great mentors, friends who we hang out with outside sessions that really challenged my thinking, and got to see, really how difficult it is to actually, make an impact in some areas. I think Project Lead really gave us enough downtime to sort of tease out, the complexity of a lot of problems that we're trying to solve in society. Kind of just remembering that every problem was once a solution. And so, while it's not always easy, that's also what makes board service worthwhile, is you're sort of paying your contribution to this like long line of people who've, through nonprofit service have contributed to, making society better each and every single year. And so
and
very nice.
I know you worked on the board, you served on the board at Princeton before Project Lead, correct? Yeah. Okay, but even with that, once you took part in Project Lead, was there anything you would say prior to being part of Project Lead, I didn't know this?
So, first of all, I didn't know much about people who work in nonprofits.
Okay.
Because when you're in the board world, you deal mostly with senior leadership and less so like with the staff members.
Right.
And I think that kind of gave me a sense of empathy as a board member to understand why it's really important to stick in governance land and not try to manage the day-to-day responsibilities of like a nonprofit, because, these are people who put their blood, sweat, and tears into, developing subject matter expertise in the work that they're doing. And it's important that board members respect that.
Right.
And that was not something, with all my frustrations of my, I loved my experience at Princeton generally, but I also felt that there were a lot of things that could have been done better. And so I kind of approached my first year as a board member at Princeton, kind of thinking of like a laundry list of like things that needed to get done. And while that's still important, I think more broadly, it's also kind of appreciating that the admin is actively working on very many of these things. And while you can help ensure that these are priorities, I think there's also a level of trust that is important to give your staff and kind of think of why it's important to support them. So that was something that I didn't really know much about before joining Project Lead. And I think it also gave me a sense of trust. I think right now, kind of understanding that like the foundation of like any democratic society is to trust that there are a lot of well-intentioned people who are doing a lot of work that you might not see, but can appreciate. And I think just seeing all these people in the room who are passionate about many different social causes, I think helped me feel a lot less disillusioned, especially as a young person who's still trying to understand the way the world works. I think it gave me a sense of hope and just kind of a reminder that, the only way forward is to build a community that's based on, accountability and also trust that, the folks at United Way, the folks at many other different nonprofits in the Seattle region and beyond are working tirelessly to make this world a much more equal society. And I think that it was really amazing to kind of learn about the value of that kind of work.
So now for someone who would hear this and say, our organization has a board that is progressive, open-minded, experienced. Why is there a need for a person of color on our board? What do you say?
I would say that the most important thing about board development is representation.
Okay.
And that is important because there is so much one can experience in their lifetime that shapes their perspective. And what adds to really great decision making at a board level is actually a diversity of perspective. So to give one example, I serve on the board of trustees for Princeton, and we have 36 board members, all from different kinds of backgrounds. We have young trustees, we have more seasoned sort of professionals in their industries, ranging from the tech industry to the nonprofit industry. And I can count the times when we've all been in agreement on one thing, at least the initial time that it's brought up. But whenever we make a decision as a board, typically it has been tested by the range of perspectives that, exist. And I think even, with the USA and the history that, this country has, right, which is that a lot of, socioeconomic inequalities because of racial injustices. And I think that any nonprofit that's seeking to do great work in education, healthcare, like finding housing for people who, don't have access to it, there's always a racial component that's like a vast component of like the work that you're going to do. And I think if you don't have board members who can speak to that experience, you're always going to be making some assumption about some community that you're not a part of.
Right.
You haven't, experienced what it's like to kind of face those kinds of obstacles. And I think that, it just really keeps organizations transforming and inviting new perspectives into the conversation that I think nonprofits need to kind of meet the needs of the current time. So I would say representation is probably the most important thing in board recruitment.
And then lastly, how does something like a project lead give you the confidence to speak up? I mean, maybe you are someone that already has that within, but generally speaking, you are in a room with different things, and sometimes the most assertive personalities will rise to the top. How does this give you that impetus and that confidence to be representative of a community and to, voice your opinion?
I think, so the two things come to mind. I think number one is the fact that you're in a room full of people who are at varying degrees of like their board service experience. And so just seeing that there are people who are serving on boards in the first place and like being in the same room as them, interacting with them, I think kind of just demystifies the whole thing.
Okay.
I think very few people actually know about board service. And it's actually really important for like the survival of any organization to have board members from all kinds of backgrounds. And so I think that's the first component, is just kind of pulling back the veil on what a person who sits on a board looks like, which is just another person who looks just like me.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second thing, which is even more crucial, is what really does give you confidence is knowledge. Because, going with the old adage that knowledge is power, right? Most people don't know how to contribute meaningfully to board conversations. And I think that there are times where people, sort of join boards and maybe don't necessarily know or aren't coached effectively on like, how do you steer the management of an organization in the right direction? How do you sort of keep the nonprofit sort of thinking about the right things and that sort of thing? It's really difficult. And so I just learned about the value of asking good questions, learning to trust your management, what it's like to keep a nonprofit healthy. I also serve on the board of the Children's Alliance, and it's just a group of amazing folks. And I think the perspective I had from Project Lead is that an executive director wants a board who challenges them. And that has been true at Princeton. That has been true at the Children's Alliance, is that they are all, at least the executive directors I have worked with closely in my board service, are all people who value different perspectives. And so just being able to be in a room where you're told that that is the foundation of a good board, is that you work with an executive director who's open to your opinions, then you kind of think like, okay, if we're aligned on the same goals, then how can I make the most meaningful contribution I can to people who are working tirelessly to make this world a better place? And I think that has given me so much confidence to know that my perspective is welcome. Good. And actually appreciated by the executive directors and the general board overall. And, just making an impact in the world of nonprofits.
Are you a person of color seeking more knowledge about nonprofit leadership? Whether you're interested in joining a board or already a member, perhaps Project Lead is for you. For more information, log on to our website at uwkc.org.
Hello, this is Lindsay Harper, Chief Philanthropy Officer for United Way of King County. I want to talk to you today about our end-of-year giving campaign. Given the changing political landscape and deep divisions across the country, it's easy to feel uncertain about what lies ahead. But here in King County, we have something powerful to lean on: our commitment to one another. Let's focus on what unites us this holiday season: our shared humanity and the generosity that makes our community strong. Together, we can ensure that no one in our community has to face life's challenges alone. Right now, many of the people who keep our community thriving, like our teachers, nurses, grocery workers, and childcare providers, are in precarious positions. Rising costs and shrinking support have left them having to make difficult choices, where one unexpected expense, a flat tire, a medical bill, or a sick day could mean losing their home or going hungry. That's where United Way of King County's Our Neighbor Fund comes in. This fund is about more than just providing help. It's about standing together as a community and ensuring that everyone has the stability and support they need to move forward. Here's how your generosity can make an impact. When 10 people give $100 a month, 5 families can stay in their homes. When 20 people give $250, 300 elementary school kids get breakfast every day all school year. And when 1,000 people give $150, kids across 10 additional King County schools get after-school meals every day. When we come together, we create a community where no one falls behind, no matter what's happening in the world around us. I want to share with you Lilani's story. She's a single mom of 2 who faced an impossible choice earlier this year. A car repair threatened her ability to get to work, stay in school, and provide for her children. Thanks to neighbors like you and the support of Our Neighbor Fund, Leilani didn't have to choose. Today, she's continuing her education, working hard, and building a brighter future for her family. Her story reminds us that even in uncertain times, we can rely on one another. Our generosity becomes a lifeline, a bridge, and a way to walk alongside one another when life really gets tough. King County, your generosity has always been the heartbeat of this community. Let's keep that spirit alive this holiday season. United is the way. United is the way we feed, house, and walk alongside our neighbors because everyone should have the opportunity to thrive, not just survive. Whether it's $50, $100, or more, your support provides food, housing, and hope for families working hard to build a better future. Visit United Way of King County's website at www.uwkc.org today to make a donation. Thank you for being part of this incredible, generous community.
The University District Food Bank is looking for volunteers to help it serve our communities. If you have a few hours a week to give, you can help the U District Food Bank make a lasting impression on people's lives. The U District Food Bank provides individuals and families with food and access to a network of community resources to help them achieve self-sufficiency. The food bank has volunteer opportunities from Monday through Saturday, with some shifts during evening hours. For more information, log on to udistrictfoodbank.org/get-involved. At United Way of King County, we are working side by side with communities to build an equitable future for everyone. Hourglass United Way is a podcast that highlights how we and our partners spend time making a difference in our communities. Our work is made possible by the generous donations from people like you. Please send comments and suggestions about our podcast to hourglassunitedway@gmail.com. To learn more about our work or to support United Way, log on to uwkc.org. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for listening. Until next time.